Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Uh, I'll be presenting today on the research ethics. I hope Dr. Ibrahim Shardar already informed you about this class, and I'll be handling on the plagiarism and the falsification and fabrication of research data in this presentation, but in line with the research ethics policies and all that. Before I move on, let me introduce myself. Uh, I'm Dr. Akbar John from Kulia of Science, and my current field of research is on uh, bioinformatics as well as molecular genetics. But I'm interested in the research ethics classes, by the way, and last semester also we handled one class for research ethics students. I hope my presentation will be beneficial to every one of you, and if you have any doubt or queries, whatever it is, you're most welcome to ask me through the email or through the call or even the class. But during the class moves on, uh, please do not ask anything. Let the presentation finish so you can ask the question. And meanwhile, while the presentation is finished, then we will have a short evaluation session for those class attendees, like those students only. Those who are joining from other places, you don't have to attend, you don't have to do the examination, because I have to submit the report to Prof. Ibrahim Shauda, by the way, for your final examination marks or whatever. Okay, let us move on to the subject that we are going to discuss today. I'm very sure from the previous classes you learned a lot of things about the research ethics, especially on philosophy, when Ibrahim Sugar explains in more detail that sometimes we don't follow. When I was a student, I couldn't catch up all the points that he usually explains, by the way. But it's really informative. But here I will try to present the real scenario that you will come across during your research time as a PhD or master student, because every one of you has to submit the thesis, and you will come across a lot of issues uh, pertaining to your subject matter. Especially this presentation will be more beneficial to biology based student rather than the CTS based, the mathematics based people, by the way. But I will try to make sure that the presentation is beneficial to both the sides, and you will be benefited out of it. And my presentation will last for about 1.5 hours, followed by 30 minutes of evaluation one. We are going to use this platform, Google Class, whereby the question will be shared with the students and you may have to answer it on spot in the class itself. And you'll be given with the 30 minutes for answering the questions. And there will be very simple questions, don't worry, and the questions will be from my presentation. So it's much easier for you. So let us move on to the next slide. I will bring the pointer. Yeah, I'm sure you can see the pointer right now. And the information that I'm going to do today is uh, on the need for the ethical codes, the authorship guidelines, research misconduct, which is divided into three sections, which is falsification, fabrication, uh, and the plagiarism or paraphrasing. Then importance of mentorship. Suddenly, the word importance of mentorship comes in because of some reasons that we will discuss it, and publication gateway and conflict of interest between the authors, and the journal and publisher policies, followed by the case studies. And also, I'm going to present to you some of the um, real-time example from our previous papers where we felt we were accused of the plagiarism, but uh, you will identify whether it is plagiarism or not when I present it. When it comes to the research ethics, it's about the trustworthiness of the research due to the soundness of its method and the honesty and accuracy of its presentation and interpretation. So it's all about the trustworthiness, and also the honesty and accuracy of the presentation of the identified or the research that we received out of our research. And these are some of the reference books that I referred for this presentation. In the middle, you can see the dark medicine and also the Nazi doctors, and this the Nuremberg Code. If you are aware of the Nuremberg Code, it's really good, because when it comes to the research ethics class, and none of the presentation will end up without discussing about the Nuremberg Code, because this is the most uh, important incident in the history of the humankind, where no proper concern were taken from the patients, but the virus is injected into the body. Hope you're all aware of the World War II. And when the World War II ends by 1940s, 47 it seems, uh, if I'm not mistaken. And what happened? Those people who were caught during the war, they were kept in the um, confined area in Germany, especially in the Nuremberg area, where they were infused with the virus called syphilis, which is actually the syphilis is the virus which is transmitted through the sexual transmission, which is called sexually transmitted disease, by the way, and it's highly fatal. And just to make sure this patients, I mean, what happened during that time? About 23 physicians, they did experiment on thousands of patients. It's not a patient, this is a volunteers. Without their proper consent, they injected the virus into their body in the lumbar, and then they said, like, if you go on, they were not informed that it's a virus, it's just a small injection and stuff like that. Then if they go out and say that they are infected with injected with something, then they will not get a proper they will not get a proper, what do you call that, the insurance facilities from the government. So they were not informed of this particular issue. So without the proper consent, they were injected with sexually transmitting disease virus, and a lot of things has arise because of this. And it was identified after like 5-6 years of the experiment. Later, all these 23 physicians who involved in this research, who conducted this research, were prosecuted, and most of them were convicted, by the way. More than 16 of them were convicted, and they were also imprisoned for lifetime. This is the major reason why the research ethics in the clinical trials emerged during that time. And this was not even addressed for about uh, 20 years time, because it was there in the book format or letter format, but it was not implemented. But later, after 20 years of the Nuremberg Code, this was considered as the research ethics, and the code that is clearly defined by the Nuremberg experiment was considered as a standard for international research on the clinical trials and all that. And few other books that you can see, research ethics, this and the research ethics for the scientists. These are one of the nice books that I read, and this you can find it also from our library, Quantum Library, by the way. Let me move on to the next slide. And when the first topic is about the author guideline, and I'm very sure everyone wants to be the author. Perhaps if you see this paper, which is published in Nature, the physics paper sets a record of more than 5,000 authors. 5,000 authors in one single paper. It's about 33 pages of the author names alone, and the number of pages run for the paper is about like less than 10, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So 5,000 authors being an author for one single paper. None of them know each other. If I have to say that it's only happens in the field of physics, by the way, especially on the particle physics. So who should be the author of our paper, or the paper that you write it, or me, I write it? There are dozens of codes for authorship, and that we will discuss it. And this is another report that is presented also in the journal Nature. The number of authors varies from field to field. For example, one author paper, single author paper in the astronomy and astrophysics is about 8%. This is the data for 1980 until 2014, which is the data, the published papers which were collected from the Web of Science uh, platform. So in the astronomy and astrophysics, single author paper is 8%. Philosophy, of course, like Ibrahim Sugar, he can write a single paper on its own, so 91 pages, 91 percentage, by the way. And the nuclear particle physics is about 15 percentage. But when you go, and of course, it's genetic, hereditary, or environmental sciences, it comes like 2 8 percentage, 2 author paper, 3 author paper. When it comes to the number of authors, when it exceeded more than 100, 1% of the paper in the astronomy or astrophysics is having more than 100 authors to 500 authors, and the cancer, of course, 0. And it moves on in the particle physics. In the particle physics, sorry, where is it? Astronomy. A huge number of papers usually appears as a multiple author paper in the particle physics area or in the field of physics in general. So what I have to say that in this slide is most of the authors perhaps do not contribute as an author, or they do not fulfill the criteria of authorship to be the author in the paper, but being considered as an author by the corresponding author, by the way. And the criteria to become an author for the manuscript, there was a clear code defined in 2004 by International Council for Medical Journal uh, Ethics Committee. Uh, so they said that there are 4 criteria to become an author of any paper. There should be a substantial contribution and the conceptualization of the design, acquisition of data, and also analysis and interpretation of data. So there should be a concept design which carries a huge point in authorship, followed by the other acquisition of data and the interpretation of data as well, and the drafting of article or revising it critically for the improvement and intellectual to the intellectual consent, and final approval of the final version of the published article or the pre the impress article, which is the gallery proof, with authors meeting all of these 3 criteria is considered as an author for the paper. But in general case, most of the author do not comply to all these 3 criteria. They are getting the honorary authorship, or they are being the ghost author or the guest author, sorry. Also the ghost author, because we do not know who the author even, but they are appearing in our paper sometimes because of sometimes supervisors, or uh, just to get the paper get accepted. This happens as well. On. Okay. um, I said in the previous slide there is one thing that I is um, just supporting the research by giving the funding, or uh, by giving the funding, also the chemicals, or some financial support, mental support, is not considered as an authorship. But this is also considered as authorship in general case in the Asian country in general. But how do we define that he should be the first author, he should be the other person should be the second, and the consecutive authors? There is a code which is internationally recognized. Points are there. For example, for the one who designed the study, he will get about 4 points, and the one who writes the paper also gets 2 more points. For example, if the one who designed the study as well as writes the paper, he gets total of 6 points. So authorship credit is to be defined based on the point and not based on the traditionally it should not be determined the departmental policies, but it's happening this way, by the way. uh, and also questioning the intellectual and professional credibility for someone who wants to colonize or being the emperor of the building, for example the director of the institute, or the dean. In many cases they get the authorship because they are being the director. So this happens in most of the institutional setup, which should be avoided, by the way, but it is happening. And also the implementation of this research, uh, the participation of study meetings and etc., the continuous meeting, all these things carries a point of about 4, and it keeps moves on. uh, when it comes to analysis, it gives about 4 points, by the way. And also the data analysis, which actually carries 1 point. That my face is hiding, my video is hiding from that particular point. But data analysis carries 1 point using the statistical analysis and all that. As long as you fulfill the criteria of getting 4 points, you can become an author. But if you want to be the first author, you need to get about 10 points, by the way. And the issue that is arising right now is the honorary authorship and also research assessment ethics period, where honorary authorships are quite common in nowadays. That's why there are about 5,000 authors, 1,000 authors, 500 authors, and more than 100 authors papers are emerging in large quantity in the top-notch research journals as well, including natures and science. But one big problem is that, for example, if 5,000 authors being the author of one single paper, who will review the paper? Because we consider that all the experts are there in the list itself. So who will review the paper? The one who has has less knowledge on the field, or the one who has more knowledge? More knowledge, one person is already there in the this one in the paper as being an author. So this point is raised also, but uh, the one who is publishing this many number of authored paper do not consider about those issues, especially it's from the Switzerland side. And mismatch between this criteria for authorships outlined by the international standards and the self-identification contribution of the researchers. There is one more study that I wanted to highlight. There was a paper published again. Uh, it's a questionnaire based paper which was sent to all the almost 87 of the top publishing researchers. They usually publish they usually publish one paper in 5 days. So within 5 days there is one paper published having their name. So for every year 365, 70 to 80 papers, and none of them are like small scale. It's all so-called Q1 or top 10 ranked journal. So they were contacted by one person who authored this paper, and he asked a lot of questions. Do you really consider yourself being an author, or do you fulfill all the three criteria of um, authorships according to the ICMJE criteria? And none of them said no. It is like a honorary authorship, whereby they are being the institutional head, being considered as author in some other place, or being a friend of someone. In that way, this paper conclude that uh, only few authors, or the one who wrote the paper and also do the experimental study, should be considered an author, and others are considered as a honorary author. Maybe in the future there will be another set of criteria will emerge in the publisher's policy, whereby they will consider who is the primary author, secondary author, and the tertiary author, or the honorary authors. That will emerge in the future for sure, just to make sure that there is no conflict of interest between authors. Because now, according to the journal policy guidelines and also the university guidelines, all the authors considered as equally uh, valued, except the first or the corresponding author, which is not even considered in other countries as criteria. but here in Malaysia we consider the first or the corresponding author. If someone who is the first and the corresponding author carries more weightage than the one who is just corresponding author, even though his name is appearing as the last, according to the US guidelines. When it comes to the credit point system, as I that the author, sorry, okay, the solo author carries about 10 points. If two author, the first one should carry the 6 point, and the second one is a 4, and three author, first one is a 5, followed by the 3 and uh, 3 and 2, and also if there is a 4 authors, it carries like 4, 2, 2, 1, and all that. So if the points for authorship varies if the number of authors keep increasing, but the one who designed the experiment, who conceptualized the idea, should carry more weightage than the one who is less contributing. This is the authorship guidelines according to international standard, by the way. And the research misconduct, the second phase of our presentation. If you happen to come across the published paper which are retracted in from 2009 until 2018, there are dozens of papers got retracted. These are the top 10 retracted papers which has more citation, 271,600 or 1,400, sometimes 410 by the and these are the paper which are retracted because of the fabrication of data. So they fabricated the results or falsified the results, whereby the journal paper got retracted by the journal itself, and these were published in New England Journal of Medicine, Science, and none of them are small level journals, So BM's evolutionary biology, these things are considered as ranked top 10 ranked journal, but still these are retracted even after all these citations. And for example, if your paper or my paper has got retracted, doesn't mean that we made it wrong, or we falsified always, or we fabricated the data. Maybe the results interpretation were given wrongly, that do not match the reproducibility of the results, or it does not match the proper conclusion that we derived out of the paper. So in that case, the journal has a full right to retract our paper, and it will also increase the number of citations even after the retraction. But what we will see, there is one word called retracted, and then the title will be there. So that doesn't mean that we always fabricate or falsify the data. And regarding this one, as I mentioned, that might be because of the falsification and fabrication. This might also be due to the improper presentation of the conclusion, or the question about the reproducibility of the method that they adopted. And for example, the New England Journal of Medicine paper, which is also paper published in the Lancet, this one is the New England Journal of Medicine paper. Retraction notice will be like this, and if you can read it clearly, if it is very clear to you, the trial had not been approved by the ethics committee. So this is also the reason why the paper get retracted, and proper patient consent was not derived. So this also the reason why the paper can get retracted. And also, it's not a double blind study, means that in terms of reproducibility and the not a proper one, and they do not follow the international guidelines, and authenticity of the data, and also the interpretation of the data using the statistical analysis were not proper, and that is the reason why the paper has got retracted. So these are the retraction notice that the journal can give on any paper at any time, based on the consent raised by someone. Even after 10 years, 20 years is also fine. Let me move on to the next slide. Okay. when it comes to the plagiarism and the paraphrasing, we all know that the plagiarism is considered as a major crime in the academic arena, but representing someone's idea or work as if it is your own idea and work is considered as a plagiarism. But as long as you do not incorporate the proper acknowledgement, then it is considered as a plagiarism. For example, you are representing someone's idea or work as if it is your own without giving their proper citation. For example, a paper, my question is, when a paper is published by someone in its the method paper, for example, and they publish it in 2000, and someone uh, writes a paper in 2005 saying that this method was slightly modified, and then they published a paper, and you are writing a paper in 2010 or 2020. Which paper you supposed to cite as a proper acknowledgement? Should it be the 2000 paper or 2015 or something in the middle? So this question is not clearly defined in none of the books. Some people, they used to say that you have to cite the original text, but when you give the original one, for example, some uh, biochemical composition, sorry, protein uh, quantification, Lowry et al., which is like 1950 something. The paper was published in 1957, which is most cited paper in the world, more than 150,000 citation. So should we cite 1957 paper? If we cite it, what the reviewer, oh, this one is a very old citation, why don't you cite something more recent, like last 5 years one? So this kind of questions will rise, but my understanding is that, and also according to the journal policy, as long as you cite the reference which is most recent one, which exactly followed the previous methodology, then it is considered as no plagiarism. So there are multiple type of plagiarisms there, which is self-plagiarism, word-to-word plagiarism, and also mosaic plagiarism. And this is due to an ethical offense, and also due to the academic laziness or the ignorance of the knowledge on the literature. So basically, when the student write the paper, they always make the plagiarism because of two reasons. Number one is a copy paste, or they are trying to reshuffle, which is a word to word, sorry, mosaic plagiarism, where they shuffle around the words and then they prepare a new sentence that do not match the original text of the one that is published before. That might also leads to the plagiarism. But up until now, we totally rely on the electronic tools for determining what exactly the percentage of plagiarism, which has to be addressed in seriously, that we will discuss it in the future slides. Let me move on to the next slide. Example of plagiarism, or how to avoid it. For example, with what distinguishes GFP protein, so GFP gene, from the receptor reporter gene is its ability to fluorescence without adding a substrate, enzyme, or cofactor. So this was published in like someone by in 1992. If you want to avoid the plagiarism, what you have to do is add a new knowledge into a sentence. Number two, rephrase completely. And if there is a possibility, the new knowledge is only after 1992. In this case, 1992 to 1996, what is the new knowledge added to that particular field? So if you can add that one, then it will not be a plagiarism. Number one. Number two, if you can add more new knowledge and make the sentence more lengthy, not more than about 20 to 25 words in a sentence, then it is the perfect one and will not be considered as a plagiarism. That's why when you want to write any sentence, you have to go through a conclusion of two or three papers, or the abstract of two or three papers on the same field, same issues, and then merge all these things together to prepare your own sentence that will be plagiarism free. And there are ways to get zero plagiarism that I will let you know in the last slide. Okay, And for example, if you want to avoid the plagiarism in this sentence, the revised sentence, as you can see, the GFP is the only well characterized example of protein that displays strong visible fluorescence. Here it is the only well characterized example protein is the new knowledge, and also strong visible fluorescence. Here there is uh, no information about the visible fluorescence without any additional substrate or cofactors. So this one was published in 1996. So this can be considered as the way of avoiding the plagiarism. One single example. And the self-plagiarism and recycling is another issue to be considered. Plagiarism, as we clearly define that it is not allowed, uh, addressing someone ideas, phrases, or sentences as if it's your own, which is not allowed. And the self-plagiarism is mostly not allowed, but the people usually do it, uh, getting the data from the previously published papers, but they will get caught very easily because now most of the institute, uh, they have to follow the plagiarism checker software that clearly identifies what exactly they uploaded in the previous version in the plagiarism checker before they send it to the journal. And also the recycling is the copy or pasting someone your own writing from an unpublished resources to another document that might be published in the near future, which is generally allowed. Uh, and these are the online platform that one can use to identify the plagiarism percentage, which I will consider as a similarity percentage rather than the plagiarism itself. What we use in UIA is a Turnitin, and also the Authenticate plagiarism scanner, plagiarism detector, CANS, EXO, and the plagiarism detection org. These are the few online platforms. Each one, for example, if you upload your paper in Turnitin, Authenticate, or any of this other platform, the percentage of similarity will be different because the algorithm that they use to identify, or the platform have an access to other resources like LCV or Sprinter will vary. So according to their logarithm, it will identify the percentage. For example, if you upload your paper and your Turnitin shows uh, that it is like 10% plagiarized or similarity index, the one that you the same paper, if you upload it in Authenticate, it might show like more than that. That we also faced it in no recent communicated paper. So these are considered as a logarithm platforms where it might vary from one platform to the other. Which one do we have to consider? No proper evidence to say that this is best and the other one is uh, slightly lower. Nothing is available right there. So we can use any platform for that matter. But we need to make sure that what platform the journal use. So usually the Turnitin or Authenticate. In my understanding, the Authenticate identifies more similarity percentage of the same paper compared to the Turnitin one. Common types of research misconduct is the falsification or fabrication and the plagiarism. Plagiarism, we addressed it in detail, so I'll go ahead with the falsification, which is a manipulation of research materials, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting research data or results such that the research is not accurately representing the recorded research. That way, the plagiarism comes with complete uh, modification of the research data that you acquired in the lab is different from the one that you are presenting. And the fabricating is the making up of research data that you have. If I have to give an example of falsification, in one paper it was published in P&A's Proceeding of Royal Academy of London group of journal. They one person, one researcher actually tried. He was keep publishing a lot of papers in a year. Uh, then in one paper he could not find the protein spot. He took a pencil, he put a dot in the TLC paper, thin layer chromatography paper, and then he said that this is the protein. Then he published it, and the journal accepted, published, and everything. And finally, two of the Japanese researchers, they repeated the same experiment, and then they could not find out the exact protein spot in their repeated experiments, and they contacted the journal, and the journal contacted the author, the one who published it, and finally they decided that the author agreed that he falsified the data or fabricated the data by using the pencil. So simple pencil can give a very good journal results, by the way. So this paper was retracted after that particular incident happened. So this kind of issues are called the fabrications, and sorry, yeah, fabrications and also falsification. There are uh, many researchers who cook the data. Okay, then it comes to the importance of mentorship. To avoid any sort of falsification, fabrication, or plagiarism, we need to have a good mentor. Our supervisors are major sources, or the supervising committee, or the research committee, or the research ethics committee of the institution. They are the people uh, who can give a proper guideline to the students, at least the one who is doing the experiment in the laboratory. But those people, the good mentor, according to most of the research ethics books, they have to be understanding person, and uh, they should understand the anger of the student and the mentality of the student, and they should make it everything clear to the student, and should not have greed, and sense of humor should be there, and approachability of good approachability, as well as they should be a good listeners. These are some of the good uh, characteristics of the good mentor, and of course this comes under the bad mentor. But but when it comes to the human, it is a mixture of both. So whatever we do, we do it for our best, inshallah. So what we need to consider is that what is good from the mentorship, we take it. What is bad, we just omit it. So but when it comes to the research, make sure two things. Number one is the method that you adopt, whether it is reproducible, whether you content with the method that you adopt to address any such particular issue. So this one should be there. And also whether it gives a new knowledge to the field. So if these two questions are addressed, then you don't even need multiple mentors. Only one person who is wise, and also having a good listener, the one who understands you as a supervisor, will be able to guide you in a better light. And when it comes to publication gateway, you will be shocked to see the informations. When it comes to publication, the journal or the publisher, they only focus on their revenue. For example, the LCB revenue for the year of 2019, according to the December report, is 2.6 billion British pound, with the gradual increase of annual increase of over 3.9 percentage. But when it was 2015, there was a gradual increase of about 15 percentage, because if you want to publish the LCBA, most of the LCBA journal, you need to pay the processing cost, and it goes more than 1,000 ringgit, $1,000. Uh, in some journals, if you want to publish the paper, even after acceptance, they ask the article processing cost of about 8,000 ringgits, or in one case, it is going up to 4,000 US dollars, 12,000 ringgits. So this is in the case of Elsevier. When it comes to which carries 2,500 journals and most one of the largest publisher in the world. And because of their publication policies, some of the institute perhaps you come across in the news, some of the institute they said they don't rely on LCPA, they don't want to subscribe to the LCPA, they withdraw it from withdraw the subscription. That is the reason why both LCPA as well as Springer lost their market for the last 2 to 3 years time. But that's why the increase during the 2015 and earlier it was 15 percentage. Now the gradual rate of increment, the revenue increase is about 4 percentage for this particular publisher. When it comes to Springer, it's about 576 million euro in 2018, and everything rely on two sources. One is the Scopus index as well as a Web of Science. So they are the one, the Web of Science and the Thomson Reuters. Um, these are the people who really have stakes to determine how good your paper journal is, and also they are the one who gives the impact factors and all that based on the citations. But the citation that they consider is within this two. If your paper is cited in some other journal which is very recently started, even by Springer or big journals, and if it is not cited under Scopus, then this citation is invalid. So these are some of the mismatches that we can find in the publisher policy. And the Scopus is the directory, the database which is owned by the Elsevier. For example, if Elsevier starts a journal, then the next day the journal can appear in the Scopus index. But same way, if the Springer Nature, even the Nature group of journal, all the Nature journals, right, and the Springer, if they start any journal, then they have to wait for 2 full years to make sure that their papers got published, cited, and then they can apply for the Scopus, or the Scopus directly will contact them to apply for the Scopus index. After Scopus index, then it goes to the Web of Science. But when it comes to Elsevier, it's not necessary because they are the one who hold the database. So they can manipulate it at any time, and they can make their papers appear in the Scopus directory the next day of its publication. So these are the other group of index people: Ebisco, PubMed, Index Copernicus, Google Scholar, uh, and more on. The Wiley is of course another publisher that you can come across. And now there are dozens of publishers, and the number of journals keep on increasing day by day. And the revenue based on 2013 data for the LCB is about almost same, but now it is increased about 400,000, uh, 400,000 euro more compared to 2016. And Sprinter, Tyler Francis, Bailey, it's all in euro millions. And one funny thing is, here you will not find the plus one group of journal. You know the plus one group, right? The plus biology, plus one, plus medicine, because this paper was written with the plus guy. So plus one, they charge about 2,000 US dollar per paper if it is accepted. Uh, but they give a processing cost waive off for most of the papers. And these are the number of journals they host, and also the number of articles they publish. Hindawi is really performing far in terms of number of articles being published, but in terms of quality is the question. But we cannot judge every single thing in one single platform, because one is of course outperforming the other in terms of journal quality. And the Dow Bentham publishers, they are coming up as well. This is the reason why there will the number of journals which are cited and the under the open access directory of OpenTivo AG keep varying every year. For example, 10,000 10,000 open 15 reduced to 9,500 in 2017. So about 500 journals were taken away from the DOAG database. Now it contains 11,000 journals because of addition of so many journals or publishers in the last few years time. And they have a gold and platinum open access as well, which is so funny. And predatory open access publishers are also there, where Bell's group of Jeffrey Bell, who listed the blacklisted journal, and this was taken as if it's a God's word, by most of the institute in Malaysia and also in other places as well. They said you cannot publish. Last few years back, you cannot. They said you cannot publish any paper in this journal, and if you publish it, it's considered as no credit, and you cannot even submit your journal, thesis or uh, your report. You, of course, even for the promotion criteria. The later, after 2018, this has gone. This has got uh, neutralized. Then they say, oh, no problem at all. You can publish this anywhere and all that. It's all because of one experiment called the Dr. Fraud experiment. It's not a fraud experiment, by the way. There is one named Anna Ozowitz. Um, she the it's actually a fake name. It is a computer generated paper. The same paper, they feed in the data into the computer, and the computer prepare a paper, and this paper was communicated to 8 different journals. There is no person with the name Anna Oswald. It's a computer. It's a robot, if you want to understand it very easily. So it was sent to 8 different journals. All the 8 different journals accepted, and they published it, and they declared it as if as this paper was generated by a computer software, and this is considered as a doctor fraud. So the journal doesn't know who the one who is communicating even, but they keep publishing the data. So this kind of data fraud experiment end up in completely omitting all the Jeffrey Bell's uh, blacklisted journal list and all that. Then now number of Hawks papers as well as keep increasing. For example, not a peer-reviewed papers get published in high-quality journal as well, especially in the special issue. And if you can see this photo, I don't know whether you will be able to see or not because my video appears. This is the Jeffrey Bell who prepared actually the blacklisted journal list. But what happened? The Dove publishers, previously you saw in the previous few slides back, they one few of the journals he listed it under the blacklisted one, and then the journal publisher contacted him and also sued the case in the international court, and ultimately he is a gentleman. So what is it? He just withdraw those names from the blacklisted list. So that kind of issues also happen in the past. And publisher policies: 32% of open access journals that are indexed in DOAG charge APC. 80% of the journal APC is the article processing cost, and 80% of journal provides a waiver as well, whether especially for the middle income and low income countries. But you need to apply for the article processing cost waiver application. So, for example, for Malaysia, you can even apply if you want to communicate a paper to LCP or PLOS or whatever the journal it is. You can apply for the article processing cost waive, whereby your paper will be published as a closed access paper, not an open access journal paper. Then you don't have to pay even a single penny for publishing your paper. So in 2013, PLOS fee waiver total about $3.9 million. So this publisher, for example, if I have a company and if I have a journal and I say that if you want to publish a paper with me, then you need to pay about $2,000. And you're communicating a paper to me, and I accept the paper, and I also upload a paper, uh, an application article processing cost waiver. Then you fill up the form and you send to me. Then I accept your article processing cost application. Then you are getting a discount of about 2,000 US dollars. What is my company worth? For one paper, it's about 2,000 US dollars. So if I publish 100 papers, it's about 200,000 US dollars. My company worth is about 200,000 US dollars in less than 1 year. So with this, I can even apply the bank loan or whatever I can. If I want to sell my company, I can even sell the company. So this kind of style is also there. This is again a business. So that's why the paper that you saw in the previous one about the the amount that the journal uh, revenue addressed was present. I mean, written by the researcher from the PLOS One group of journal. And some publishers have automatic waiver policies, so even without you know what, your paper will get accepted. Sorry, your paper will get published without you pay any money. But they have terms and conditions which we always click yes. There, the company worth keeps increasing. At least 68% of the journal collect the APC as part of APC. At least, I mean, even if you apply APC, article processing cost waiver, in, for example, clause 1, initially they will not agree 100%. They will agree about 60%, followed by 80%, but you need to keep uh, sending them the email, and you should say that you have no money in your pocket. Then finally they will agree with 100% processing cost waiver, for which you need to submit one letter from our RMC. Then they will consider it as well. Authors have right to reuse, republish, archive, and also distributed their own published data, and the journal publisher has not is not responsible for subsequent use of the content. This is there in the terms and conditions. So it is just an online platform that you can buy it for about few $100, and then you can mint money like anything. This is the real uh, general policies at the. And when it comes to the case studies, the final part of our study, I have few questions to ask. Number one, the case number one is the researcher, for example, Dr. R. He contacts you saying he should be included while you are the publisher itself or the journal chief editor. So the person, Dr. R, contacts you and saying that his name should be included as an author in a paper, but the one the the list of author when the paper was communicated, the Dr. R name is missing. So uh, now he is the one who is contacting you and asking you that your name should be included as a part. His name should be included as an author because he contributed or with the data or some of his data being used for the data interpretation of this particular paper. What you will do? Should you retract the article or do nothing or contact the named author or get the article reviewed again? If you say, yeah, you have full rights to do any of these options, but if you are a good editor or the one who handles the journal, you will contact the named author, the one who communicated the paper at the beginning. Or now what happens is, to avoid all sort of complications, the journal will just reject the paper immediately. So if there is no conflict of interest information in the paper, then paper will be immediately rejected. No retraction, nothing. So if you select the answer that is contact the named author, then you go to the second question. The corresponding author says that he or she is happy to acknowledge the contribution of Dr. R, but do not feel that his contribution should be considered as an author. So, what a journal author, the journal editor should do, issue a correction to an acknowledgement, contact the author institution and ask them, or do nothing, change the authorship to Dr. As Dr. R requested, ask the Dr. R if it is acceptable to him. And of course, if you are a very genuine person, you will do this one. If you are less genuine, then this one is okay. So preferable is the Dr. R to be contacted and should be asked for acceptability of him. Whether he accepts to be acknowledged in the paper rather than being an author. Okay, you inform Dr. R that the correspondent has agreed to correct his acknowledgement. If he is not acceptable again, and demand the author should demand the article should be retracted just because of the authorship alone. And if everybody follow this one, then most of the other papers will get retracted by now. And issue an expression of concern. The journal can do it. Ask the author to resolve the dispute by referring to their institutional guidelines and policy, or retract the article, issue a corrections. So the journal is supposed to do the authors to resolve the issue by following the institutional policy. That's why in most of the institute, what happens, once you write a paper, you cannot simply communicate it. For example, in the case of National University of Singapore, it has to pass through a first barrier, which is uh, the screening of your research uh, quality, and then it can be, first of course, your supervisors and all that, second is your research committee people, then only it can be communicated to the journal. So this criteria is followed by most of the top institute, but we do not follow this one. So in this question, what the journal policy should be is ask for more details so you can work out whether the author are deserve to be an author. Of course, you can retract it, but they will not do it in general. And this kind of issues happen in few of the journals. That's why some paper being published is after the papers get published, the author name or the corresponding author name get blacklisted by the journal, and they will not accept from that particular author any paper for the next 2 years. The second case study is authors of the paper published a year ago, but they say they realize that the findings were affected by the contaminated cell culture. What the reviewer, uh, the journal should do it. They have to retract the paper or the contact the author institution, get the paper reviewed again, ask for more detail. Of course, they supposed to contact the author to get more detail. Then authors supply more details in showing that the entire experiment would be invalidated by the contamination, but their conclusions are still the same as shown by the other experiment they have done. So if that is the case, issue a corrections, correct the author's institution, retract the paper, nothing, consult with the journal policy or uh, institute publication ethics policy according to the guideline, whether what the author, the publisher is supposed to do. When it comes to this question, we ask the author more experimental data, but two options for the publisher to do. Number one is issue a correction or consult the journal policy. In that way, they can continue with further step. You explain to the author that the retraction is required. In this case, the journal decided that they have to retract the paper. because it is because of the contaminated cell culture. So the paper needs a retraction as the article is unreliable and it cannot be reproduced. And also it's considered as a misconduct. Sorry, it's not considered as a misconduct, it's a honest error. So in that way, in the retraction notice, what the published paper, the one who wrote the article, can do it. It's because of the honest error. If this word is there, we are in the safer side. For example, if even if after we publish it, if our paper get retracted and they said it is because of the honest error or misinterpretation of the results or misinterpretation of the data analysis, then it should be very well fine, no problem at all. But if they say it is because of the falsification, then the retraction has a greater value. That's why most of, uh, sorry, not most of, few of the prime ministers, when they read the written script, that was plagiarized as well. This happened with some of the prime ministers talk in the past. In this case, issue an expression of concern, issue a correction, track the article, contact the author institution. So the journal can do any one of this. Followed by the third case study, a reviewer tells that the editor has already seen the paper published in some other language, in this case the Spanish, the same paper published in English, or the tables and figures are the same. What the journal should do, contact the author institution or get the copy of translation of the Spanish paper to check whether it is overlapping or not, proceed with the review or reject the submitted paper. So simple. If I am the person, I will just reject the paper immediately, because if it is the same table and figures after validating the overlapping of the content. But let's see what the journal do. Okay, the editor concludes the English and the Spanish paper overlaps significantly, and the percentage of similarity goes more than like 50-60 percentage. uh, they contacted the author, and also because the author said it's because of the junior researchers or the student who did mistakenly the plagiarism and stuff like that. And the author replied the apology, saying that uh, he wanted the paper to reach the wider audience and has no idea of publishing in two different languages not permissible. What should the editor do? Check the journal instructions and or clear about the translations or not. Check that the submission system requires author to disclose any previous published publication of the work. Write to the author institution explaining the journal policy, or consider whether the paper warrants re- republication in English or not. So in that case, the journal can decide based on the instructions given on the translations of the research material according to the journal policy. In the case of case study 4, the reader contacts the editor of the journal, a particular journal, to draw an attention or similarity between the research article published between the journal X and the journal Y. What the editor should do, they have to download both the papers, compare the similarity, retract the paper if the similarity is more than the journal guidelines, and issue a notice of redundant publication, contact the author institution. The editor finds, in this case, he found more than 60% of the similarity between two of the paper published in two different journals, uh, even though the author says that they want to reach the multiple audience, the number of different audience and etc. But if you are an editor, you should retract the paper immediately, saying that it should be, it is because of the highest similarity observed between two papers published in two different journals. And discuss the problem with the editor or publish notice redundant publication when the author from publishing in the next journal is also the case. In some cases, they also ban the author from journal X, also the journal Y. So with this, my first section ends, I will move on to some other presentation in the second video file, where you will see how the similarity checkers identify the similarity, whether this similarity can be considered as a plagiarism or not, and how to overcome this kind of problems. So I will end up this particular presentation, and I'll move on with further one in the next video file.